Coming up, porn use is linked to lower sexual performance for men, but higher sexual performance for women. We're going to talk about that study right now on this edition of Depraved and Debaucherous. Thanks for listening in. Post has put up another great story. And there's a lot of stories I started learning upon starting the new program that I felt like I wanted to take more time to talk about when it comes to sexual health, relationships, social psychology. These are all areas I really care about. And I've read a whole lot of books when it comes to self-help and self-improvement, psychology. This is fascinating to me. Just understanding the male and female psyche of today's youth and understanding what the choices they're making and why things are going on, because I want to understand. I don't want to be out of touch and out of tune. I want to be understanding of all this. Psychological medicine has published some new research saying that frequent pornography use is related to different sexual outcomes for young men and young women. And this study, which is one of the largest of its kind, indicates a higher frequency of porn use is associated with a worse sex life among men, but the opposite appears to be the case among women. I can tell you that's a fact. It's amazing to see that, but you know what? Of the trysts that I've had, I haven't had long relationships myself, but when I have dated or I've been able to be active with particular females, the ones I was most active with, that I was in friends with benefits with, they all watched porn. It's really fascinating that they were all very comfortable, and it doesn't matter like the feel of the shape of their body or what they did, but I got to learn that they enjoyed it. They watched it. I didn't watch it with them, but I'm just saying that I just knew they did because I saw it and I thought it was fascinating. And you know what? When there were women that did feel that way and they were watching it and they appreciated it and enjoyed it, I actually realized that they were much more comfortable in the bedroom, much more comfortable being intimate in general. And it doesn't mean that, these women have to go ahead and be watching on a regular basis. Like if they just know it, they watch it, they see some of it, great. And I think there's something to be said about those who might be queer or trans or various other, whatever personality or whatever gender type you subscribe to. We even know that, even among homosexual men or women, that, some of the most popular adult content out there is same sex across the board. When I went to the shows, when there was adult entertainment shows out there, I can't tell you how many times how much gay porn was so much more lucrative and much more popular, because there were a lot more people that just didn't want to just see the same old because they feel like it's just antiquated. It's like, okay, we're not watching Deep Throat again. We're watching something else. And it's amazing how much content and gay content that was so popular. And I think about the show The Deuce that also kind of put that point across. It's not just girl on girl. There's a lot of guy on guy and just other different things going on. So it does make sense why this story would come out and this information they said. So they put this together and summarized that, quote, research investigating the impact of pornography on young women and men's sexuality is based in two categories. Let me highlight it real quick. First, some scholars argue that porn use sets unattainable standards of sexual comparison and generates anxieties about one's sexual performance. So yeah, that what you think the bedroom is going to be like and what your sexual activity is going to be with your partner, you have to understand that porn is completely overblown and out of proportion and not real life. And for you to try to replicate it, it's just going to be a failure altogether. The other side, or scholars argue that porn can be a source of sexual inspiration and could actually be used to become a better sexual partner. And the study authors said this respectively. And you know what? I'm on the second side. I'm not saying you need to watch it all the time, but you know what? If you're familiar with it and you know what it is and you see some of it, and it gives you something to kind of just say, okay, you know what? It's normalizing sexuality. This might not be the most popular opinion, because for those that are religious, they're not going to want to hear the fact that, that you should be watching that kind of stuff, because it's, again, sins of the flesh. I get it. But when you look at it, I can understand why people would say these researchers would say, you know what, it's better off if you want to be better sexually, you need to understand, actually see the visuals of how it's done instead of trying to figure out for yourself when you don't have any real experience in it. Because honestly, the experience is by trial by failure, trial by error. Or if you're not into that, some of the people they're talking about here that have not had sexual partners, okay, say for instance, you have a girl that might be a virgin or is very inexperienced, or a guy is very inexperienced for that matter. They see that, but they also need to distinguish the fact that, as they said in the initial part of this article, that there are unattainable standards, that you're going to get these expectations that you're never going to be attained. And that's the mistake that a lot of guys make as well with the girls they're with, because they think with the girls they're with, they're going to be just like the girls they saw in the videos. And that's not the case. It's all fantasy. It's, and you know, even if it's amateur, it's all fantasy. It's not the real deal. Now, they did a study and they collected responses from more than 100,000 young men and women. So they first of all recruited over 100,000 French-speaking men and women from 5 different countries, 8,600 heterosexual couples, and a total of 21,898 participants on all 3 ways of this study. The researchers concluded that more frequent porn use was associated with lower sexual performance for men, but higher sexual performance for women. And they said that when we find that men watch porn, the more they report having doubts about their sexual performance, the more they report having sexual problems. And for heterosexual couples, the more their female partner report being sexually dissatisfied. But that's also the fact that this is what's being said in the study. And I want to make this point. So you can observe it, but not be so caught up into where you're believing this is what the sexual performance is supposed to be. But if guys or girls are not getting together and getting freaky or, you know, doing it like dogs, if they're not being sexually active or intimate together, if you're seeing more people staying apart and not being sexually active together with whomever they're with, if people are not getting that intimate or romantic or sexual, and we're getting less and less of that, then more people are going to rely on these decimated expectations. The idea is that we want, and we really, in all perpetuity, what we would really want optimally is porn needs to be just something that doesn't need to be a factor, because we want people to go ahead and have sex. We want people to enjoy themselves, to be romantic, to be intimate with partners, whichever partner you want, whichever persuasion, whichever sex, whichever gender equality, whatever, do it. But experience love, experience passion, experience sex. The problem is that since there's been so much of this puritanistic kind of feel to it, and girls and guys have been kind of pushed apart, and the battle of the sexes has become bigger and bigger every day, then that's the reason where everybody's relying to go to things like porn in the first place. It should have never gotten as big as it did. Okay, it was not even a factor, 50 years ago. And people used to figure that out. There should be a point where we should realize, if it was possible, you're not going to fix all this problem altogether. But individually, young men and women, you don't want to be able to go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to just satisfy or gratify myself by watching videos or looking at pictures. Because now the problem was too, is that before 30 years ago, you might have just had photos, pictorials, cover, centerfolds, and this and that. Now you got full-fledged videos in 4K and 8K. Now it's just like impossible to get around that. And the thing is that it's taking away the fact that if women would be more willing, or guys would be much more willing to come together and realize, stop trying to be so hard up on each other. Guys obviously want to engage in sex. The women, maybe not so much. Maybe it's different. Or we don't know because we're not communicating with each other, because there's all these rules in dating and relationships that have to be met. And if there were some people that didn't have to feel like they need to be stuck in a commitment, there should be a change about that too. Porn doesn't need to be a factor. Does that make sense? Sex should actually be between people and not something we have to watch. Because if you're doing that, then there's no need for porn. Does that make sense? In the story, they continue to say, now, the researchers also controlled for variables such as age, education, nationality, sexual orientation, number of lifetime sexual partners, relationship status, length of the relationship, frequency of masturbation, frequency of sexual intercourse, knowledge about sexuality, and social desirability. And the gender differences observed over time, an increase in porn use over time is associated with a reduction in sexual performance for men and improvement for women, increases the plausibility, but not the certainty, that a causal link exists between porn consumption and one's sexual performance. There was another study in the United States that also gave the same point. Women who use pornography to have better sexual performance is in line with the previous study, but the effect should not be overstated. And the average age of the sample was 21.45 years. So they're picking young men and women in this study. And they conclude and they say, we believe that overall our findings can be seen as revealing of the irony that porn, which is a male-dominated industry that targets a male-dominated audience, is linked with the erosion of the quality of men's sex lives and the improvement of women's sex lives. Yes. Because it is for men more than not. There are not a lot of women that need that, because women can also be just very, that's what romance novels, that's what other things can go on where they can feel something more emotionally. Meanwhile, men are much more visual. And so this is a thing where optimally, I wish we didn't have porn, and guys and girls would just be able to hook up and have sex, because that would solve a lot of problems in the world. I really believe that more than not. So take this nugget of knowledge and realize, guys, if you want your sexual performance to be better, if you want to enjoy sex better, curb away from porn. Just don't watch it. Don't feel the need you need to get yourself off to that. They also mentioned an important caveat in the study. It was focused on heteronormative porn among heterosexual men and women. But even with this, it still comes down to the fact that if you are of various persuasions, various lifestyles, LGBTQIA, CP, whatever, that it still comes down to the fact that it's dominant versus feminine. It still comes down to that, dominant versus submissive. And so you could take it that the more dominant species or person, if they're consuming more porn, then they're going to be tending to go ahead and have an effect on their sexual performance and their sexual expectations. So this is a great story to follow along. And so don't judge anybody about it. And you know what? Don't try to hold sex as a carrot dangling out. Women and men, if that's the case. Of course, be careful, because if you're going to be sexual, remember that you want to make sure that if you need to take contraceptives or use prophylactics or whatever, have it safe as well. Of course. But keep that in mind, all that here. And don't judge anybody. And just realize, allow men and women to be a little depraved and debaucherous.